Let's go first of all to the government, which seems to have been caught on the back foot by a bigger than expected increase in prisoner numbers. It announced today that it planned to spend $1 billion creating another 1,800 jail beds. Most will be at a new 1,500 bed facility at the existing Waikeria Prison in the Waikato, which is expected to open its doors to the new facility in 2020. The new accommodation block planned for Mount Eden Remand Prison will add another 245 places. Huge increase in the number of remand prisoners. The Finance Minister, who last week was contemplating how he might spend a $1.8 billion surplus, now says the price tag for the new beds plus ongoing running costs will limit options for spending. I asked sociologist Dr. Jarrod Gilbert, who's researched gangs in particular. He's at Canterbury University and also an independent researcher, if when Bill English famously described prisons as fiscal and moral failures, this is the government failing by its own standards.
Look, sadly, that appears to be the case, doesn't it? You know, we've got a prison population that's a third higher than Australia's, 40% higher than the UK's, more than 60% higher than Canada's. Well, I don't think New Zealand's any more wicked than those countries. We're just doing something wrong, and unfortunately, this does point to failure, regardless of how we spin it, and it's a shame.
If we're doing something wrong, what is it?
Well, we've got a very tough task, actually, as it happens. Firstly, to rehabilitate prisoners within prison is a very difficult thing to do. They've been socialised all of their lives in a particular way, and we're saying to corrections, now solve all these social ills and go ahead and be good people. That's not easy to do, so that's the first thing. But the second thing is, and this is where it's a bit shameful really, is that we've fallen into this trap of saying that prisons will somehow cure our social ills, that we can just send people to prison, and that's the end of the game. It's not the end of the game at all, of course, and until we start to invest in the drivers of crime, we're going to have what Bill English called the moral and fiscal failure of prisons, and in New Zealand that's accentuated worse than in countries that we would ideally like to compare ourselves to.
If we look at what Judith Collins said about this when she wrote an op-ed for the New Zealand Herald back in March, I'm sure you saw it at the time, and she was talking about record highs then, and they've gone up since then, but she puts a lot of it down to the remand prison population. She says remand prisoners accounted for around 90% of the population increase in the last year. Is this because bail is harder to get, or is that smoke and mirrors to a certain extent?
No, that's true. I don't know the exact figures, but what we can see over the last 10 years is a dramatic increase in longer sentences. So that's what we would term prisoners who are serving more than 2 years. Less than 2 years, the numbers remained relatively stable, but we've seen a dramatic increase in longer sentences. So that's one of the issues. The other is that the parole board, it's much more difficult now to get parole than it was. The conditions are much, much tougher. And so those people that we are sentencing for longer terms, we're not releasing as quickly as well. So yes, there are some issues around not getting bail, and the remand prisons are significant, but there's much more to it than that.
Okay, so if people are getting longer sentences and if they're serving more time before the parole board is releasing them, have we seen a politicisation of the process? In other words, are sentencing judges and parole boards reacting to a sense from Wellington that people have to do longer lag?
Yeah, of course. There's no doubt that the increases we're seeing are political. They have been for a very, very long time. While the crime rates have been significantly dropping since the early 1990s, we were seeing an inverse in the rates of imprisonment. Really after the late 1990s, when both Labour and National didn't argue about what was best, the best way to tackle crime, they simply argued about who could be the toughest on crime, and that's what got us into this situation. There's little doubt that politics are a reason for these numbers now, and unfortunately, as Bill English is discovering, it's politics that'll have to get them out of it, because for every, for the $1 billion odd we want to spend on the Department of Corrections, that's money that can't be spent elsewhere, of course.
Sociologist Dr. Jarrod Gilbert from the University of Canterbury and also from Independent Research Solutions.